Tonight, as the world outside softens into twilight, we will gently journey back, allowing our minds to serenely drift through the echoes of a time not so long ago, a time when childhood, though filled with its own unique light, was also deeply shaded by the vast, unfolding canvas of World War II. Please find your most comfortable position, perhaps dimming the lights until they are just a whisper against the coming darkness, and allow yourself to simply, peacefully, listen. The early 1940s, a period carved into the very memory of the world, brought with it a profound and pervasive sense of change, a quiet but insistent hum beneath the surface of daily life. For children growing up then, the world was not static, but a constantly shifting tableau, painted with the stark realities of wartime necessities and anxieties. Their youthful eyes, though often unburdened still by the complexity of adult fears, could not escape the pervasive nature of the conflict that gripped nations. It seeped into their games, their conversations, and even the very fabric of their homes. This era, though distant now, still carries a particular resonance, like a soft melody played on an old, cherished record player, reminding us of different rhythms and different ways of living. Life on the home front, particularly in countries directly involved in the war, was characterized by a collective effort, a quiet steadfastness, and an ever-present awareness of sacrifice. For children, this often translated into a world where scarcity was a familiar, though not always frightening, companion. Rationing, a system put in place to ensure fair distribution of limited resources, became a defining feature of their daily existence. Imagine, if you will, the small hand of a child, clutching a set of ration coupons, these delicate paper slips representing their family's allotted measure of sugar, butter, or meat for the week. These were not just pieces of paper, they were tangible symbols of a shared purpose, a quiet understanding that every little bit counted. The weekly trip to the local grocer, which for us today might be a swift and abundant affair, was then a more deliberate and often more humble experience. Children would observe their mothers carefully calculating quantities, deciding which precious item to acquire, often making difficult choices between various household needs. Sweets, a joyful indulgence for any child, became a rare and treasured treat, perhaps a small piece of dark chocolate shared sparingly, savored with an intensity born of its infrequent appearance. This cultivation of patience, this understanding of delayed gratification, was an unintended yet profound lesson woven into the fabric of their childhood. They learned, gently and subtly, the value of what they possessed, and the patience inherent in waiting for what they did not. Beyond the dinner table, the impact of rationing extended to almost every aspect of life. Clothing, for instance, became a lesson in practicality and resourcefulness. New garments were a luxury, and so, children often wore hand-me-downs, their trousers patched at the knees, their dresses carefully mended and remended. Mending became a household art, a small act of creative perseverance, transforming worn fabrics into wearable apparel once more. The concept of "make do and mend" was not a catchphrase but a lived reality, teaching children the simple satisfaction of caring for what they had, and the quiet beauty of prolonging an item's usefulness. Toys, too, reflected this spirit of ingenuity. Store-bought playthings were less common, and so, imagination became the primary architect of amusement. A simple stick could become a majestic sword, a collection of pebbles could transform into a bustling village, and discarded scraps of fabric might be fashioned into clothes for a beloved doll. This fostered a deep wellspring of creativity, encouraging children to invent, to build, and to find endless stories within the ordinary world around them. Perhaps one of the most poignant aspects of wartime childhood was the pervasive shadow of family separation. Fathers, elder brothers, uncles, many men were called away to serve, leaving gaps in the family structure that felt immense and often deeply unsettling. For children, this meant long absences, conversations punctuated by the quiet worry of distant battlefields, and the constant, hopeful anticipation of letters from afar. A carefully folded envelope, arriving with its unique scent of transit and its precious cargo of words, became a lifeline, a tangible connection to a beloved figure far from home. These letters, often read aloud and reread many times, were cherished, providing glimpses into a world of duty and danger that children struggled to fully comprehend, yet felt with an inherent certainty. The absence of a paternal figure often meant that older children, particularly boys, might grow up more quickly, taking on greater responsibilities within the household, becoming a new, quiet pillar of support for their mothers. Sisters might become confidants, sharing the burdens and hopes of the family in a way that truly bound them together. The family unit, though stretched and challenged, often emerged with a deepened sense of interdependence and fortified emotional bonds. There was a quiet strength that emanated from these homes, a resilience born of shared experience and mutual support. The anxieties of war also manifested in more direct ways for children. Air raid drills became a familiar, if somewhat unsettling, routine. The piercing wail of a siren, a sound unlike any other, would send children and adults alike scrambling for the nearest shelter, a basement, a specially constructed Anderson shelter in the garden, or simply the safest room in the house. These moments, though often brief, were punctuated by a shared silence, a collective holding of breath, understanding that danger, however remote, was a very real possibility. Looking up at the night sky, for some children, was no longer just about the beauty of stars, it was a silent vigil, scanning for the unseen shapes of aircraft, a quiet moment of both wonder and apprehension. For children in heavily bombed areas, the experience of having their homes damaged or destroyed, of being evacuated to the countryside, were deeply formative, etching memories that stayed with them for a lifetime, memories of displacement and resilience, of adaptation and finding comfort in new, unexpected places. Yet, amidst these pervasive realities, childhood found its way to flourish. Children retained their innate capacity for joy, for play, and for finding moments of pure, unadulterated happiness. Their games, though sometimes echoing the themes of the conflict, were still infused with the boundless energy and imagination of youth. They played in the streets, in overgrown fields, and in quiet backyards, creating their own worlds, their own adventures. They learned to find immense satisfaction in small victories, in shared laughter, in the simple comfort of a friend's companionship. The communities themselves often drew closer, forming tighter bonds, looking out for one another's children as if they were their own, providing a sense of collective security and warmth during uncertain times. And so, as we gently close this first chapter of our exploration, let us reflect on the children of the early 1940s. Their world was undeniably shaped by war, by rationing, and by separation. Yet, through it all, they learned valuable lessons of resourcefulness, patience, community, and resilience. Their childhoods, though different from our own, carry within them a profound testament to the adaptability of the human spirit, and the enduring capacity for light, even in the deepest shadows. If you have enjoyed this peaceful journey, please consider leaving a like or subscribing, allowing us to continue creating these tranquil drifts through history. For now, may your own night be filled with serenity and sweet dreams. Tonight, we ease into a whispered recollection of childhood's long past, a gentle journey into the mid-20th century, specifically the years spanning the 1940s and 50s. As you settle into your comforters and dim the lamp's glow, perhaps you might feel a faint warmth spreading through you, a quiet curiosity about a time so different, yet so fundamentally human. If, as our journey unfolds, these soft narratives bring a tranquility to your evening, a quiet escape into the past, then perhaps a gentle tap on that like button and a quiet subscribe would be a comforting gesture. Our gentle exploration now leads us deeper into the landscape of those early years, beyond the simple pleasures we first touched upon, into a world where a quiet sense of scarcity often shaped daily life, particularly during the war years of the 1940s and even subtly lingering into the new decade. It was a time when the concept of rationing was not an abstract government policy, but a palpable rhythm of domestic existence, a quiet hum beneath the surface of every meal, every new garment, every cherished possession. For children growing up then, this was simply their normal, the air they breathed, the gentle boundaries of their world. Imagine, if you will, the small hand of a child, perhaps reaching for a slice of bread, or a spoonful of sugar, and implicitly understanding that these commonplace things were not limitless. This understanding was not born of stern lectures, but of the very fabric of their homes. Ration books, those unassuming booklets filled with coupons, were not merely bureaucratic items, they were tangible declarations of communal purpose, quiet agreements to share what was available, so that everyone might have enough. These books often resided in a special drawer, perhaps next to the tea caddy or tucked into a kitchen cabinet, handled with a quiet respect by mothers, their pages carefully torn for sugar, butter, meat, or tea. Each coupon represented not just a quantity, but a planned allocation, a deliberate portioning for the week, for the family. Food, naturally, was where rationing's presence was most acutely felt. Staples like sugar, butter, and bacon were carefully measured, turning everyday cooking into an exercise in resourceful ingenuity. A slice of cake became a true treat, savored slowly, its sweetness more profound for its infrequency. Meat, often a centerpiece of meals today, was a much rarer commodity. Families learned to stretch what little they had, transforming humble root vegetables and pulses into surprisingly satisfying meals. A Sunday roast, once a common indulgence, became a precious event, each small portion enjoyed with an almost ritualistic appreciation. The artistry of the housewife during this era was not in elaborate culinary displays, but in the quiet magic of making simple ingredients taste wonderful, of creating a nourishing warmth from very little. Children, witnessing this quiet resourcefulness, absorbed it as a fundamental lesson. They learned that eggs, for instance, were not always available in their natural state, and powdered eggs, often sent from America, became a common, if less preferred, substitute for baking and scrambling. Their flavor was different, less rich, but they served their purpose, and children accepted them without question, as part of the texture of their times. Clothing, too, bore the subtle mark of scarcity. New clothes were not purchased on a whim, but thoughtfully considered, often saved for special occasions. The concept of hand-me-downs was not merely practical but essential, a quiet testament to the enduring life cycle of garments. A coat might begin its journey on an older sibling, then pass to a younger one, perhaps with a new button or a mended seam, before eventually being repurposed into patches or rags. Even the fabric for new clothes was often rationed, leading to a vibrant culture of mending, darning, and making do. Mothers, with needles and thread, became quiet artists, patching worn knees, turning collars to hide fraying edges, and ingeniously altering larger garments to fit smaller frames. Children would watch, perhaps with a quiet fascination, as a worn dress was transformed into a serviceable apron, or an old blanket re-emerged as a cozy coat lining. This process instilled a deep appreciation for the effort that went into every stitch, making each garment feel more precious, more imbued with the care of its maker. Toys, those objects of childhood delight, also reflected this resourceful spirit. While some manufactured toys existed, particularly after the deepest cuts of the war years eased, many of a child's most cherished playthings were often homemade or repurposed. A simple wooden block could become a train, a collection of pebbles, a flock of sheep, an old tin can, a drum. Imagination was the most abundant resource, transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary. Children spent hours creating their own entertainment, building elaborate forts from blankets and chairs, crafting boats from bark and twigs, or playing simple games with marbles, skipping ropes, or hopscotch figures drawn in chalk. The quiet clatter of a homemade pull toy, fashioned from scraps of wood and old wheels, had its own unique music, a melody of ingenuity and simple joy. Even pre-made toys, when they were acquired, were treated with immense care, understood to be valuable possessions that might not be easily replaced. A beloved doll or a sturdy toy car was often repaired repeatedly, its flaws and wear marks becoming part of its history, contributing to its cherished status. The quiet discipline of rationing extended even to sweets, which were often rationed for longer than other items, lingering as a memory of scarcity well into the early 1950s. A weekly ration of sweets might be a single bar of chocolate, or a small handful of toffees. These were often savored, perhaps broken into tiny pieces to last longer, shared amongst siblings in small, solemn portions. The anticipation of the sweet ration was a quiet ritual, a gentle highlight in the week's rhythm, making the taste all the more delightful when it finally arrived. The corner shop, with its rows of jars that once held brightly colored delights, now often displayed only a few, carefully measured items, a gentle reminder of the world's quiet shift. Through these everyday experiences, children of the 1940s and early 50s learned, almost by osmosis, a quiet reverence for resources. They understood, without needing complex explanations, that nothing was truly disposable. They saw firsthand the quiet magic of mending, the gentle art of repurposing, and the profound satisfaction of making do. This was not a childhood of deprivation in the emotional sense, but one tempered by a widespread understanding of shared necessity. It fostered a quiet creativity, a gentle self-reliance, and a deep appreciation for the simple abundance of everyday life once scarcity began to recede. The lessons learned in those quiet kitchens and diligently patched clothes formed a subtle, enduring part of their character, a quiet echo in their later lives, long after the ration books had been put away for good. Tonight, we drift back to a time of quiet courage and resourceful spirits, a period when the earth itself became a partner in daily life. So, as you settle deeper into your pillows, perhaps dimming the ambient light around you, let us explore the gentle rhythm of a 1940s and 50s childhood, particularly how the practical needs of the era shaped young lives in ways that were both grounding and profoundly instructive. And if, by the end of our journey, you find a sense of peace in these remembered moments, a soft subscribe or like would be a quiet appreciation. The whisper of the wind through newly turned soil, the soft warmth of the sun on a child's brow, these were common sensations in countless backyards across the nation during the 1940s and extending gently into the 1950s. This was the era of the Victory Garden, a name that itself carries a hint of quiet determination, suggesting not just sustenance, but also a shared purpose. These were not merely gardens, they were acts of collective will, blooming symbols of household self-sufficiency and national resilience, transforming what might once have been neat lawns or neglected patches into vital, green engines of productivity. Imagine, if you will, the gentle hum of activity in a suburban backyard, a small plot of earth carefully tilled and tended. Here, amidst rows of nascent vegetables, children were often deeply involved, their small hands tracing the furrows, their eyes wide with curiosity as tiny seeds were nestled into the cool soil. It was an unspoken understanding, a quiet family effort where every member, regardless of age, had a part to play. Little fingers carefully spaced out bean seeds, feeling the grainy texture of the earth, perhaps even wondering about the magic held within those seemingly insignificant kernels. They learned the delicate art of watering, holding a small watering can with solemn concentration, ensuring each green shoot received its necessary drink. This direct interaction with the earth fostered a very tangible connection to nature, a relationship built not on abstract lessons, but on the lived experience of growth and renewal. A child could watch, day by patient day, as a tiny sprout emerged from the brown earth, unfurling its first delicate leaves towards the sun. They observed the intricate dance of insects, the industrious ladybugs diligently patrolling for aphids, the buzzing bees flitting from flower to flower, their legs dusted with golden pollen. These were quiet lessons in ecology, absorbed simply by being present, by observing the slow, steady progress of life in their own small patch of cosmos. The responsibilities were often light but consistent. Perhaps it was weeding, a task that required both diligence and a gentle touch, distinguishing the desired plant from the persistent invader. Or harvesting, the pure joy of pulling a plump carrot from the soil, still encrusted with earth, its sweetness a direct reward for weeks of patient tending. There was a particular satisfaction in biting into a tomato, warm from the sun, grown from one's own efforts, or shelling peas, the rhythmic pop as each green globe was released from its pod, accumulating in a bowl for the evening meal. This participation went beyond mere chore, it was an education in resourcefulness. Children understood, implicitly, that the food on their plates was not simply appearing from some distant, unseen source. They saw the labor involved, the care required, and in doing so, developed an appreciation for the bounty that the earth provided. It fostered a sense of contribution within the family unit, a feeling of being a valued and necessary part of the household's well-being. The knowledge gained, often passed down through quiet instruction from a parent or grandparent, was practical and immediate: how to tell when a cucumber was ripe, the best way to handle delicate lettuce leaves, the patience required for a root vegetable to mature hidden beneath the soil. Picture a young girl, perhaps 7 or 8, carefully plucking ripe strawberries, her fingers stained crimson, the sweet scent of the fruit filling the warm afternoon air. Or a boy, his sleeves rolled up, proudly carrying a basket overflowing with freshly picked green beans, his face smudged with a bit of dirt, but his eyes gleaming with accomplishment. These were shared moments, often accompanied by quiet conversation, or simply the comfortable silence of shared work. The success of these victory gardens was often remarkable. Millions of these plots collectively produced a substantial portion of the nation's fresh produce, easing the strain on commercial food supplies and transportation networks during a time of global conflict and widespread rationing. For families, it meant a fresh and varied diet, even when other items were scarce. For children, it meant lessons in self-reliance, the gentle understanding of where food came from, and the profound satisfaction of contributing directly to their family's sustenance. This deep connection to the land, nurtured through communal effort and personal engagement, instilled a quiet appreciation for the cycles of nature and a practical understanding of sustainable living. It was a time when the simple act of growing food became a powerful symbol, a connection to the earth that transcended the immediate need for nutrition, embedding itself deeply into the fabric of daily life and the developing character of a generation. The fertile earth, in its quiet abundance, taught lessons that extended far beyond the garden gate, nurturing not just bellies, but also spirits, with a profound sense of purpose and belonging. And so, as the days drifted into evening, after the last chores were done and the supper table cleared, a very different kind of light would begin to glow in households across the land. It was not the bright, utilitarian light of a lamp, but rather a soft, warm emanation from a cherished piece of furniture, often occupying a place of prominence, perhaps in the living room or the parlor. This, of course, was the radio. No longer a newfangled curiosity as it had been in earlier decades, the radio by the 1940s and 50s had settled comfortably into its role as a central hearth, a pulsating heart of sound around which families would gather. The very act of turning it on held a certain ritualistic charm. A gentle click of a knob, followed by a low hum, then perhaps a faint crackle as the tubes warmed, a prelude to the voices and music that would soon fill the room. The dial itself, often backlit with a serene, amber glow, would be carefully tuned, the fingers gently adjusting until the desired station, clear and strong, emerged from the static hiss. This was not simply a device for entertainment, it was the world's quiet messenger, a constant companion that brought the vast expanse of human experience directly into the cozy confines of the home. For children, particularly, it was a gateway to boundless realms, a catalyst for imagination, far more potent in its way than the passive flickering images that would much later dominate screens. With only sound to guide them, their minds became the canvas, painting vivid pictures of daring heroes, mysterious villains, distant lands, and bustling cityscapes. Evenings were often punctuated by the thrilling episodes of radio serials, week after week, leaving listeners on cliffhangers that would be discussed and pondered until the next installment. The voices of characters became intimately familiar, their intonations and mannerisms as clear as if they were standing in the very room. The creak of a door, the distant whistle of a train, the thunder of hoofbeats, all crafted with meticulous sound effects, transported young listeners away from their comfortable chairs and into the heart of the story. There was the Shadow, with his chilling opening line, "Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men?" The shadow knows, a whisper that would send a delightful shiver down young spines. Or the intricate puzzles and captivating narratives of Sherlock Holmes, where logic and deduction were honed by the subtle clues in the voices and ambient sounds. Children would often create their own visual narratives in their minds, picturing the detective's shrewd gaze, the smoky London streets, the bustling Baker Street apartment, each detail rendered unique and personal by their own inner artistic vision. But it was not just the adventures that held sway. The radio was also a constant purveyor of music, from the lilting big band tunes that made parents tap their feet, to the crooning serenades that filled the airwaves with sentiment and romance. Children, too, absorbed these melodies, the rhythms sinking into their subconscious, shaping their early understanding of musical form and expression. They might hum along, or even invent little dances in the privacy of their own minds, inspired by the saxophone's wail or the trumpet's clear notes. And then, there was the news. Even if the content itself might be distant and sometimes grave, the manner of its delivery was measured, authoritative. Families would gather, often in respectful silence, as the calm, articulate voices of newscasters reported on world events. During the war years, particularly, these broadcasts were vital, a direct link to the triumphs and struggles happening far beyond their small towns and neighborhoods. Government announcements about rationing, about wartime efforts, about encouragement and resilience, would be disseminated through this powerful medium, creating a shared understanding and a communal sense of purpose within the household. Children might not always grasp the full weight of the global unfolding, but they understood the unspoken solemnity, the way their parents listened, the gravitas that filled the room during these broadcasts. It educated them in a quiet, ambient way, about their place in a larger world, about responsibilities and distant happenings that shaped their daily lives. The radio thus served as a communal tapestry woven from sound, bringing the family together, bridging distances, and igniting the beautiful, boundless canvases of youthful imagination. It was a time when the spoken word held tremendous power, a time when listening was a primary form of engagement, fostering a different kind of attentiveness, a deeper, more internal processing of information and story. It was a gentle invitation to simply close one's eyes, or perhaps gaze abstractedly at the glowing dial, and let the world unfold in vibrant, auditory splendor within the quiet theater of the mind. Tonight, we continue our gentle meander through the landscapes of childhood, inviting you to settle deeper into your blankets, perhaps adjust your pillow just so, and let the soft murmur of these stories guide you towards a tranquil rest. If, by the end of our journey tonight, you find a sense of peace, then perhaps consider leaving a gentle like or subscribing to our channel, so we may continue to share these quiet histories with you. As the echoes of war began to recede, a hushed quietude settled over the world, but it was a quietude pregnant with possibility, brimming with the promise of a brighter dawn. The immediate aftermath of conflict often leaves scarcity in its wake, but the 1950s in America emerged as a period of profound reordering, a time when the nation, having successfully navigated the turbulent seas of global strife, found itself poised at the precipice of an astonishing economic blossoming. The long years of wartime rationing, of making do with less, slowly gave way to an abundance that was both palpable and deeply welcome, a tangible relief that permeated homes and communities across the land. It was as if a deep, collective breath was taken, and with that exhalation came a wave of optimism, a hopeful gaze directed firmly towards the future. This era, often termed the post-war boom, was characterized by a remarkable surge in manufacturing and production. Factories that had once churned out tanks and planes now retooled themselves to produce refrigerators, washing machines, and a myriad of other consumer goods that had been either scarce or wholly unavailable during the war years. These household appliances, once luxuries, began their slow, steady march into the average American home, transforming daily life and lightening the burdens of domestic labor, especially for mothers. Imagine the hum of a new refrigerator, a soft, consistent sound that spoke of fresh food and fewer trips to the icebox. Picture the gentle wash and rinse cycle of a new automatic washing machine, replacing the strenuous labor of the scrub board and the sheer physical effort of boiling clothes in a vat. These were not merely conveniences, they were symbols of a new era, markers of a rising standard of living that allowed for more leisure, more comfort, and indeed, more time for family. The economy, fueled by this consumer demand and underpinned by government investment in infrastructure, began to expand at an unprecedented rate. Jobs were plentiful, wages rose steadily, and for many families, the struggle for basic sustenance, a common thread woven through earlier decades, began to recede into memory. This newfound economic security laid the groundwork for a profound social transformation, a reshaping of the American landscape, both literally and figuratively. One of the most significant manifestations of this change was the explosive growth of the suburbs. Before the war, most Americans either lived in bustling cities or in more sparsely populated rural areas. But the 1950s ushered in an era of suburban sprawl, as families, often encouraged by attractive government-backed loans for veterans, sought out new homes and a different way of life. Imagine acres upon acres of farmland, previously dedicated to crops or grazing animals, slowly, systematically transforming into neatly grid streets, lined with newly constructed, often remarkably similar, single-family homes. These were not the grand, sprawling estates of the wealthy, nor the cramped tenements of the urban poor. These were modest, yet comfortable, dwellings, typically featuring a small yard, perhaps a porch, and enough space inside for a growing family. The very air in these burgeoning communities carried the scent of fresh-cut lumber and newly laid asphalt, mingled with the earthy smell of newly planted lawns. The rhythmic thud of hammers, the whir of saws, and the distant rumble of construction machinery became the ambient soundtrack to this period of intense building. This movement to the suburbs had a profound impact on the experience of childhood. For many children, it meant more space, both indoors and out. They had their own rooms, or at least shared with fewer siblings than their parents might have. Their backyards became their own private kingdoms, perfect for digging, for makeshift forts, for endless games of tag or hide-and-seek. The streets, often quieter than those in the bustling city, became expansive playgrounds, ideal for riding bicycles, for roller skating, for games of stickball or hopscotch that stretched from one lamppost to the next. The suburban landscape, with its manicured lawns and orderly hedges, created a sense of safety and predictability, a sheltered environment where children could explore and play with a degree of freedom that was perhaps less common in the denser urban centers. It was during this time that the concept of child-friendly environments truly began to take root. Communities designed with families in mind started to emerge. Neighborhood parks, once a rarity, became more commonplace, featuring swing sets, slides, and sandboxes where laughter and the squeal of delight were the most common sounds. Schools were often built within walking distance of many homes, allowing children the simple pleasure of walking to and from their classes with friends, a journey filled with whispered secrets and shared observations. Neighborhoods often buzzed with the sounds of children playing outdoors until dusk, their voices carrying on the evening air, a symphony of youthful energy. The streetlights, when they flickered on, signaled the approaching end of outdoor playtime, a gentle call back to the warmth and comfort of home. This era also saw the rise of a distinct youth culture, as advertising and media began to specifically target children and teenagers. Television, a relatively new medium, entered more and more homes, slowly beginning to shape the collective consciousness of young people. Shows specifically designed for children, often featuring wholesome characters and simple storylines, became a staple of after-school viewing. Imagine the grainy black and white images on the screen, the static sometimes crackling softly, as children gathered around, mesmerized by the moving pictures and stories unfolding before their eyes. New toys, often made of plastic, in bright, primary colors, began to flood the market, offering new avenues for imaginative play. From hula hoops that spun with delightful freedom to slinkies that gracefully tumbled downstairs, these objects became indelible parts of childhood memories, symbols of a light-hearted fun that seemed to define the decade. The growth of the suburbs, while offering new opportunities and a sense of fresh beginnings for many, also fostered a certain uniformity, a shared experience that differed from the diverse ecologies of earlier cities and rural areas. Many suburban developments were quite homogeneous, both in terms of architecture and often, unfortunately, in terms of demographics. This created a sense of shared community, where neighbors often knew each other well, where backyard fences were more often for decoration than for division, and where children from different families mingled freely, creating their own intricate networks of friendships. Birthday parties were celebrated with simple cakes and games in the backyard. Sleepovers, filled with whispered stories and suppressed giggles, became a cherished ritual of growing up. The expectations placed upon children during this period also began to subtly shift. With the economic stability came an increased focus on providing children with a stable, secure, and happy upbringing. The idea of childhood as a distinct and precious phase of life, deserving of protection and nurture, became more deeply ingrained in the societal psyche. Parents, many of whom had experienced the hardships of the Depression and the upheaval of war, often strove to ensure their children would not face similar deprivations. This era saw a greater emphasis on education, on recreational activities, and on fostering a sense of belonging within a burgeoning consumer culture. It was a childhood shaped by the comforting rhythms of a booming economy, the open spaces of the burgeoning suburbs, and the nascent stirrings of a new media landscape, all contributing to a unique tapestry of experience for the young souls growing up in the sun-drenched, optimistic decade of the 1950s. Let these gentle images continue to drift through your mind, as the sounds of bygone eras softly blend with the quietude of your present. Allow yourself to be carried further into the soothing depths of your rest. As our gentle journey through the mid-20th century continues, we find ourselves drifting peacefully into a new and evolving landscape, a landscape that began to stretch outward from the bustling heart of cities, offering a different rhythm of life. We are now arriving at the threshold of the suburbs, those burgeoning communities that truly began to define a new American dream for many families during the 40s and 50s. Imagine, if you will, the hum of post-war prosperity, a soft, sustained note that encouraged growth and aspiration. With the return of servicemen and the creation of new families, there was a growing desire for space, for a patch of green, a sense of quietude away from the urban clamor. This gentle yearning gave rise to a phenomenon that would reshape America's geography and its family life, the suburban expansion. It was a time when open fields, once destined for agriculture or simply left untouched, began to transform with remarkable speed. Developers, often with innovative and efficient building techniques, started to lay out neat grids of streets, each lined with newly constructed homes. These were not the grand, sprawling estates of earlier eras, nor the tightly packed row houses of the city. Instead, they were often modest, yet well-appointed, single-family dwellings, the Cape Cods, the ranch styles, the two-story colonials, each with its own promise of comfort and belonging. Picture rows upon rows of these identical or very similar houses, each receiving its first coat of paint, its first carefully manicured lawn. The air would have been a gentle blend of fresh lumber, newly turned earth, and perhaps a faint whisper of construction activity, a productive, hopeful sound. For many families, this represented an upward trajectory, a tangible realization of hard work and sacrifice. It was an escape from the multifamily dwellings of city apartments, a chance to truly own one's own piece of the world. One of the most immediate and cherished benefits of this suburban shift, particularly for families with children, was the sheer increase in space. Gone were the days for many urban dwellers where play was confined to fire escapes, narrow alleys, or crowded city parks. In the suburbs, suddenly, there were yards, expansive, green rectangles and squares of earth, perfect for childhood adventures. Imagine the gentle rustle of newly planted saplings that would one day offer shade, the faint scent of freshly cut grass on a warm afternoon. These yards became the primary canvases for a child's imaginative play. A sturdy oak might become a pirate ship, its branches a crow's nest. A sunny patch of lawn could transform into a secret fort, meticulously constructed from old blankets and rearranged patio furniture. Digging in the dirt, planting a small seed, or simply lying on the cool grass gazing at the clouds became a daily, cherished ritual. These private green spaces offered a sense of freedom and ownership, allowing children to explore and create within the safe bounds of their own home. Beyond the individual yards, the very layout of these new communities fostered a different kind of childhood. Suburban streets, unlike their bustling city counterparts, were often designed with a sense of calm and safety in mind. Traffic was typically lighter, moving at a more sedate pace, making the streets themselves an extension of the play area. Think of the smooth, fresh asphalt glistening after a summer rain, or the gentle crunch of gravel on a newly paved cul-de-sac. These streets became arenas for bicycling with newfound abandon, for roller skating, for games of hopscotch marked out with brightly colored chalk. Kickball games could sprawl across an intersection, temporarily halted for the passing car, only to resume with renewed zest. Children could walk or bike to school with a sense of independence, their journey accompanied by the soft chirping of birds and the distant sound of lawnmowers. This redefinition of space profoundly impacted daily routines and the very fabric of community. With more children living in close proximity, and with safer environments for play, a vibrant neighborhood culture began to blossom. Parents would often know all the children on their street, and a sense of collective responsibility for their well-being often emerged. Picture, if you will, the gentle murmur of adult conversations across a hedge, or the shared laughter emanating from a backyard barbecue on a Saturday afternoon. Children moved freely between houses, their shouts and giggles echoing softly through the quiet streets. Friendships were forged over shared lemonade on a porch swing, or during long afternoons spent exploring undeveloped patches of woodland at the edge of the development. There was a sense of shared experience, of growing up together within a supportive, expanding circle. The local school often served as the very heart of these new suburban communities, a place not only for education but for social gatherings, PTA meetings, and community events. The development of parks and playgrounds, often centrally located, provided further spaces for organized play and informal meetings, fostering a sense of shared public space unique to this suburban ideal. This rise of the suburbs, gentle listener, was more than just a housing trend, it was a societal shift that offered a particular vision of childhood in the mid-20th century. It presented a world of increased personal space, of relative safety, and of a nascent community spirit that would shape the identity of a generation. It was a time when the sound of children playing outdoors became a quintessential soundtrack to American life, a hopeful and comforting symphony echoing softly through neighborhoods both new and enduring. We will gently explore more facets of this unique period as we continue our calm and unhurried journey. As we journey deeper into the landscape of childhood during these mid-century years, we find ourselves on the cusp of an elegant transformation, a subtle shift in the warm glow within the family home. Having nestled into the familiar comfort of radio's embrace, listening to narratives unfold purely within the mind's eye, a new light began to flicker and glow in living rooms across the nation. This was the quiet, unassuming arrival of the television, a phenomenon that would, with gentle persistence, begin to reshape the very fabric of family entertainment. Imagine, if you will, the soft hum of unfamiliar machinery, the slight smell of warmth emanating from a polished wooden cabinet, often positioned with a revered air in the corner of the room. This was not an overnight revolution, but rather a slow, graceful unfurling, like the delicate bloom of a night-scented flower. In the early 1940s, and then with a more pronounced presence in the 1950s, the television took its first tentative steps into American homes. Initially, it was a luxury, a statement of progress and modern living, often acquired with careful consideration and perhaps a touch of awe. Before its advent, the radio had held its undisputed reign as the monarch of the airwaves, its voices and soundscapes painting vivid pictures against the canvas of the imagination. Families would gather, drawn by the magnetic pull of storytelling, comedies, and dramatic serials, their minds actively constructing each scene. Children, with their boundless capacity for wonder, would often lie on parlor rugs, eyes closed, transported to distant lands or thrilling adventures, solely by the power of narrated words and evocative sound effects. The crackle of a fire, the distant mournful cry of a train whistle, the joyous peal of laughter, these were the bricks and mortar of their entertainment world. Then, the television offered something wonderfully different, something fundamentally new. It introduced the visual. No longer were scenes to be conjured in the mind, they were presented, in flickering shades of gray and white, directly before the eyes. The first images that appeared on those small, often convex screens were perhaps a little grainy, a touch ethereal, yet utterly captivating. There was a magic in seeing, rather than merely hearing, the characters of beloved stories, the faces of news presenters, the movements of variety show performers. It was a window to a world previously only accessed through auditory means. Consider the gentle, almost reverential manner in which families would adjust to this new presence. The living room, already a hub of activity centered around the radio, now saw its furniture subtly rearranged to grant every family member optimal viewing. Chairs would be angled just so, rugs might be pulled closer, and a quiet sense of anticipation would settle in the air as broadcast time approached. Parents, often marveling at the technology as much as their children, would fine-tune the rabbit ear antenna, coaxing the clearest possible signal from the ether, a delicate dance of adjustment and patience. Early programming was, in its own way, quite charmingly nascent. Children's shows often featured puppets or genial hosts guiding young viewers through simple stories and songs. Comedy acts, variety shows, and live dramas slowly began to fill the broadcast schedules, offering a glimpse into a broader cultural panorama. To watch Lucille Ball's expressive face contort in comedic genius, or to witness the earnest delivery of a news anchor, felt like an intimate connection to a wider, unfolding world. It wasn't just entertainment, it was a sharing of experience, a communal viewing. The focus of family gatherings began to shift ever so slightly. While storytelling, reading aloud, and board games certainly endured, the television introduced a new communal ritual. The family would sit together, often in comfortable silence, their gazes aligned towards the glowing screen. This shared experience, of collectively watching a program unfold, fostered a new kind of togetherness. Discussions would often follow the broadcast, replaying favorite moments, attempting to decipher confusing plots, or simply marveling at the novelty of it all. It added another layer to the rich tapestry of family life during these decades, a new thread woven into the fabric of their evenings. For the children of the 1940s and 50s, the television was a slow reveal, an evolving wonder. Those born in the early 1940s might have been in their preteen years as the medium became more widespread in the 1950s, experiencing its introduction with a growing curiosity. Younger children, perhaps seeing it for the first time in their nascent years, simply accepted it as a part of their world, a shimmering box that brought pictures and sounds into their home. Yet, for all, it held a certain allure, a quiet fascination. It was a testament to human ingenuity, bringing distant images directly into the heart of the home, reshaping the landscape of dreams and diverting the flow of attention in the most gentle, yet utterly profound, of ways. This quiet marvel, once a glimmer on the horizon, was now steadily casting its soft, flickering light upon the living rooms and the childhoods within them. Tonight, we drift back to a simpler time, a landscape painted with the warm hues of childhood in the mid-20th century. For this journey, I invite you to find your most comfortable spot, perhaps dimming the lights ever so slightly, allowing the gentle murmur of my voice to guide you. If you find solace in these quiet reflections, and if our shared moment enhances your evening, a gentle like or a soft subscribe would be a kind gesture. As our journey through the echoes of the past continues, we find ourselves stepping out of the sturdy homes and into the wide-open expanse, where the setting sun often found children still immersed in their vibrant world. The structure of the day, so meticulously followed within the walls, seemed to dissolve once the threshold was crossed. A different kind of rhythm took over, one dictated not by clocks, but by the slow lengthening of shadows, the rumble of a distant dinner bell, or the tender call of a parent from a porch. This was a time characterized by an expansive freedom, a sweet liberation that many children today might find quite foreign. The notion of scheduled playdates, of carefully curated activities, was largely unformed. Instead, the hours after school, or indeed, the entirety of a sun-drenched summer day, stretched out like an uncreased canvas, awaiting the brushstrokes of youthful imagination. It was a time of less supervision, a period when boundaries were often far-flung, defined sometimes by the edge of a particular field, the curve of a forgotten creek, or simply the sound of a mother's voice that could carry just so far. The neighborhood itself transformed into a sprawling, intricate playground. Every unpaved alleyway, every overgrown vacant lot, every cluster of mature trees became a potential site for adventure. A patch of tall grass held the promise of a hidden trail, a forgotten wheelbarrow in someone's yard could become a pirate ship or a rocket to the moon, and a stack of discarded lumber behind a hardware store was material for architectural wonders. These were the raw ingredients for worlds constructed not with plastic and bright colors, but with dirt, ingenuity, and boundless energy. Building forts was a foundational activity, a rite of passage almost. These were not elaborate, prefabricated structures, but organic creations, born of persistence and whatever materials could be scavenged. Sometimes, they were simple affairs, a couple of old blankets draped over a clothesline or a sturdy hedge, transforming into a secret lair. Other times, they possessed a grander vision, meticulously assembled from discarded wooden pallets, lengths of rope, branches found after a storm, and even pieces of corrugated tin that shimmered faintly in the afternoon light. The construction process itself was a profound lesson in cooperation, negotiation, and rudimentary engineering. Decisions were made, roles assigned, and every nail hammered, every branch secured, was a collective achievement. The fort became more than just a shelter, it was a sanctuary, a meeting place, a stage for countless dramas, a silent witness to whispered secrets and boisterous laughter. Its walls, whether fabric or found wood, offered a profound sense of ownership and belonging. Beyond the fort's protective embrace, the spirit of exploration beckoned. Children roamed with an often unfettered curiosity, their senses attuned to the subtle shifts of their surroundings. A rustling in the bushes might signal a hidden animal, a shimmering surface could reveal a promising puddle to splash through, and the scent of damp earth after a rain often led to fascinating discoveries. They knew the landscape intimately, the easiest climb on the old oak tree, the precise spot where the most interesting stones could be found in the creek bed, the shortcut through Mrs. Henderson's rose garden. These were maps etched not on paper, but in memory, guided by sun, scent, and the subtle contours of the land. This unguided exploration fostered a robust independence. When a problem arose, a scraped knee from a fall, a friend who strayed a little too far, a sudden summer shower, children learned to rely on their own wits, to comfort each other, to find their way back. There was an inherent trust in their ability to navigate the world, to learn from minor mishaps, and to emerge a little wiser, a little more resilient. Imaginative games formed the very bedrock of this outdoor existence. Without a constant stream of manufactured entertainment, children created their own. A simple stick was not merely a stick, it was a sword in a gallant battle, a magic wand, a fishing rod for imaginary fish, or a mount for a grand adventure. A pile of rocks could become a bustling marketplace, a secret code could be invented and communicated through elaborate hand gestures, and a patch of dandelions transformed into a feast for a king. These games were fluid, evolving with the mood of the day, the number of participants, and the boundless inventiveness of young minds. They were narratives woven on the fly, where everyone had a part, and the only limits were those of their collective creativity. The roles adopted in these games were often drawn from the stories they read, the radio programs they listened to, or the real-life personas they observed in their own communities. One moment, they might be daring cowboys rounding up invisible cattle, the next, brave explorers charting unknown territories, or perhaps even dignified schoolteachers imparting wisdom to a row of imaginary students. There was a genuine, unself-conscious commitment to these roles, a deep immersion that allowed them to truly inhabit these ephemeral worlds. The sheer physical activity embedded within this play was remarkable. Running, jumping, climbing, digging, rolling, these were not chores, but exhilarating components of their daily lives. Muscles were strengthened, coordination refined, and an enduring sense of physical confidence was nurtured. There was a raw, unfiltered joy in the sheer exertion of it all, in the feeling of the wind on their faces as they raced, the satisfied ache in their limbs at the end of a long day. Sun-kissed skin and grass-stained knees were badges of honor, tangible evidence of a day well spent, a day fully lived within the natural world. And as the light began to fade, and the sky deepened into hues of lavender and rose, there was often a lingering reluctance to leave these private worlds. The calls from home, initially distant and easily ignored, grew more insistent. With a final sprint, a last secret whisper, or a promise to reunite the next day for another adventure, the children would reluctantly make their way back, carrying with them the rich spoils of their outdoor excursions, a pocket full of smooth stones, a memory of a thrilling chase, or the quiet satisfaction of a fort newly completed. They returned invigorated, content, and often a little dusty, ready for the evening's routines, their minds already dreaming of tomorrow's boundless possibilities. The world outside the door was not just a place, but an active participant in the unfolding narrative of their childhoods, a silent companion in their adventures. And so, as we continue our gentle journey into the tapestry of childhood from those bygone days, we now find ourselves drifting softly into the heart of the neighborhood itself, where the bonds between children were often woven together not just by shared streets and backyards, but by something more deliberately chosen, something both simple and profoundly significant, their very own clubs and gangs. Now, before any vivid images of delinquency or organized crime begin to stir within your mind, let me assure you, these were gangs of an entirely different nature, born not of malice, but of innocence and the deep, human need for connection. These were, for the most part, wonderfully informal groups, springing up naturally like wildflowers after a warm spring rain. There was no grand charter, no official initiation, at least not in any intimidating sense. Instead, membership was often a matter of proximity, of shared ages, and perhaps, a common flicker of interest. You might be part of the Maple Street crew, simply because you lived on Maple Street and spent your afternoons congregating near the old oak tree. Or perhaps you were a steadfast member of the Secret Treehouse Society, a title whispered with reverence among those who had earned the right to climb its rickety ladder. What these groups fostered, above all else, was a profound sense of belonging. In a world before constant digital connection, where many families were still finding their footing after the tumultuous war years, having your own small circle of trusted companions was a quiet anchor. It was a space where you were known, where your individual quirks were understood, and where your presence was genuinely valued. Imagine the feeling, a child's heart swelling with the quiet joy of knowing that when you stepped out your front door, there would be familiar faces, ready for shared adventures. This sense of camaraderie was a soft, comforting blanket, enveloping young souls in a feeling of security and shared identity. These were not just groups for idling away the hours, though moments of blissful idleness were certainly a cherished part. They were, in many ways, the very first self-organized social structures many children would ever encounter. Think of them as miniature laboratories for life, where essential lessons in cooperation and leadership were subtly, gently, and often unconsciously, etched into young minds. Consider, for instance, the planning of a simple collective endeavor. Perhaps the Elm Street Explorers decided to build a fort, a magnificent, sprawling structure, at least in their imaginations, hidden deep within the woods behind the houses. This wasn't a task for one person alone. It required discussion, negotiation, and a surprising amount of logistical thinking. Who will bring the hammer? Where can we find the best discarded planks? Who is strong enough to lift that heavy branch? These were questions that sparked quiet debates, leading to gentle delegation and shared responsibilities. One child might naturally gravitate towards directing the placement of the foundation, exhibiting an early spark of leadership. Another might be particularly adept at scouting out construction materials, offering their unique skill to the collective effort. Or perhaps the bike brigade was plotting its daily route through the winding back alleys and quiet residential streets. There might be a natural leader who proposed the most adventurous path, or one who remembered the safest crossroads to navigate. The unwritten rules of the road, the signals for stopping and turning, the agreement to wait for slower riders, these were all small acts of cooperation, teaching patience and mutual consideration. These groups also provided a safe space for trying out different roles, for understanding the dynamics of a small society. A child who was usually quiet and reserved at home might find their voice when suggesting a new game to their club members, testing the waters of assertiveness in a gentle environment. Another, accustomed to being the center of attention within their family, might learn the valuable lesson of stepping back and listening to the ideas of others. The rules of these clubs, if they existed at all, were often unwritten, understood through tacit agreement and shared experiences. They might involve a secret handshake, a particular phrase known only to members, or an understanding that certain topics were off-limits to outsiders. These small rituals, seemingly trivial, actually served to reinforce the group's identity and strengthen the bonds among its members. They created a shared world, a miniature universe where children could experiment with social norms, develop conflict resolution skills, often through playful arguments that resolved themselves swiftly, and practice the art of compromise. In essence, these neighborhood gangs and clubs were quiet crucibles of character. They offered a precious balance between freedom and structure, allowing children to exercise their burgeoning independence while also learning the vital importance of interdependence. They were spaces where a child could be unequivocally themselves, surrounded by peers who, for that particular moment in time, shared their world, their secrets, and their dreams. The memories of these informal alliances, of shared laughter in a hidden den, of whispered plans under a summer sky, and of the comfortable companionship found in these self-made societies, would linger with these children long into their adult lives, a soft glow of belonging from a simpler time. Tonight, we continue our gentle journey into the gentle echoes of childhood from the middle of the last century, a period often remembered for its steadfast rhythms and comforting routines. As you settle into your most comfortable space, perhaps dimming the lights just a little more, and allow the quiet hum of the world to recede, we will explore the structured world of school days, those formative hours spent amidst textbooks and chalk dust. Should you find a measure of peace in these soft-spoken recollections, and perhaps feel a pleasant drowsiness begin to unfurl, a gentle tap of the like button or a quiet subscription would be a lovely gesture, but for now, just relax and let your mind drift with the narrative. Our focus now shifts to the very heart of many a child's day during the 1940s and 50s, the school itself. For most, this meant public education, a system designed to impart not just knowledge, but also a certain set of values and a shared understanding of their place in the world. The curriculum, especially in those formative years, was built upon what were considered core subjects, the very bedrock of a well-rounded mind. One might picture neat rows of desks, perhaps a little worn with years of use, facing a large blackboard where elegant cursive letters or neat mathematical equations were carefully inscribed by the teacher's steady hand. Arithmetic was a fundamental pursuit, children diligently learning their multiplication tables, often chanted in unison, a rhythmic hum filling the classroom. The intricate dance of numbers, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, formed the foundation for later understanding, each concept patiently explained and then practiced until it became second nature. Reading, of course, was another cornerstone, with Dick and Jane perhaps populating many early readers, their simple adventures and clear sentences providing an accessible entry into the written word. Children would sound out words, syllable by syllable, their young voices murmuring as they slowly pieced together sentences, the joy of comprehension a quiet reward. Spelling bees were not uncommon, a gentle competitive spirit encouraging careful attention to letter order, and the quiet satisfaction of correctly reciting a challenging word could feel like a small triumph. Writing, too, was meticulously taught, often beginning with careful attempts at forming letters, then words, and eventually, beautifully legible sentences, all executed with pen and ink or the ever-present pencil. Beyond these core academic subjects, there was a quiet, yet firm, emphasis on broader societal values. Discipline, for instance, was a significant component of the school environment, a gentle but unwavering expectation of order and respect. Classrooms, particularly in larger schools, could be quite substantial, with 30 or even 40 children being guided by a single teacher. In such settings, a clear structure was not merely desirable but often essential for effective learning. The teacher was the undisputed authority figure, and their word was generally accepted without question. A quiet word, a knowing glance, or a brief moment of standing in the corner could be sufficient to realign a wandering attention or correct a minor transgression. The atmosphere, while firm, was typically not overbearing, rather, it was one of structured learning, where children understood their roles and the boundaries within which they operated. Rote learning, a method of memorization through repetition, was quite common during this era. This approach was particularly useful for subjects like history dates, geographical facts, or those aforementioned multiplication tables. One might hear the gentle drone of a classroom reciting historical timelines, or the names of states and their capitals, a steady cadence that reinforced the information. While modern pedagogical approaches might differ, for many children of the 40s and 50s, this repetitive practice instilled a foundational knowledge that served them well. The beauty of it lay often in its simplicity and its efficacy for certain types of information. It was not about deep critical analysis in those early years, but about building a strong, reliable base of facts on which future knowledge could be layered. Patriotism, too, was gently woven into the fabric of the school day, an unquestioning reverence for country being deemed an important lesson to impart. The Pledge of Allegiance was a daily ritual, delivered with hands over hearts, young voices reciting the familiar words. American flags often adorned classrooms, sometimes a large one at the front of the room, or smaller ones perched on desks. Lessons might touch upon historical figures, important national events, or the principles upon which the nation was founded, all delivered with a tone of quiet pride. This was not a flamboyant display, but a steady integration of civic pride and national identity, cultivated with a gentle hand and a firm belief in its importance. The physical environment of these classrooms could vary, of course, but often evoked a sense of sturdy utility. Desks were typically wooden, sometimes with an attached seat, sometimes separate. Inkwells, though perhaps less common by the late 50s, might still be found, a small, round cavity designed to hold ink for quill or dip pens. Bookshelves lined with worn textbooks and reference materials, globes standing proudly in corners, and perhaps a large map pulled down over the blackboard for geography lessons, these were familiar sights. The scent of chalk dust, paper, and perhaps the faint aroma of wood polish would have mingled to create a unique classroom smell, one that could evoke a specific set of memories for those who remember it. Classroom management was an art refined by experience, particularly with those larger class sizes. Teachers often employed a clear system of rules and consequences, communicated unequivocally from the very start of the school year. Quiet hallways, orderly lines, and respectful listening were not just encouraged but expected. The shared understanding of these expectations across the school population meant that much energy could be dedicated to teaching and learning, rather than constant behavioral redirection. This environment, while perhaps seeming strict by modern standards, often provided a secure and predictable framework within which children could learn and grow, knowing what was expected of them and feeling a sense of order in their day. The focus was on shared respect and a collective journey of learning, moving through the curriculum together, each child encouraged to contribute to a quiet, productive atmosphere. And so, these school days, with their distinct structure, their core subjects, and their gentle emphasis on discipline and patriotism, were a significant part of growing up in the 1940s and 50s. They shaped young minds, imparting the knowledge and values that were felt to be essential for becoming responsible and engaged citizens. The quiet echoes of those classrooms, the steady rhythm of learning, and the firm yet caring guidance of teachers, remain a cherished memory for many, a testament to a time when education was viewed as a steadfast path toward a well-ordered life. Now, as the soft imagery of these classrooms begins to fade, you may find yourself gently drifting, your own thoughts becoming as quiet and calm as the world we have just explored together, ready for a peaceful rest. Tonight, we drift back to a simpler time, a quiet corner of the mid-20th century, to understand a little more about the rhythms of childhood in the 1940s and 50s. As you settle into your most comfortable space, perhaps dimming the lights just a touch, allowing a gentle hush to envelop your surroundings, I invite you to join me on this calm journey. If, by the end of our tranquil exploration, you find a gentle peace in these stories, a soft press of the like button, or a quiet subscription, would be a gentle acknowledgement. In those decades, the very fabric of family life often wove itself around a shared understanding of contribution, a quiet expectation that each member, even the very youngest, played a significant, if often small, role in the daily functioning of the home. It wasn't merely a suggestion or a temporary task, but rather an ingrained part of growing up, a quiet symphony of responsibilities echoing through the hallways and backyards of countless American households. Children were, in a very real and tangible way, considered valuable hands, their efforts folding seamlessly into the routines that kept the household humming along. Imagine, if you will, the gentle clatter from a kitchen sink, perhaps sometime in the late afternoon. This wasn't always the domain of a mother or father alone, but often a shared space where nimble, if small, fingers were adeptly navigating soapy water, carefully handling plates and cups. The act of washing dishes, for instance, was far more than just a chore, it was a quiet lesson in diligence, in the careful handling of family possessions, and in the immediate satisfaction of seeing something cleaned and returned to its proper place. A child might stand on a small stool, hands plunged into the warm, sudsy water, learning the delicate balance of scrubbing without breaking, rinsing without splashing too much. The younger children might be assigned the softer task of drying, their small hands carefully polishing plates, learning the subtle art of a streak-free finish, while older siblings tackled the main washing with a growing proficiency. The rhythmic sound of water, the gentle scrape of a sponge, the quiet chatter or gentle humming that might accompany this shared domestic ritual, all contributed to an atmosphere of cooperative effort, a tangible sense of each person doing their part. Beyond the gentle warmth of the kitchen, the outdoors offered a different array of tasks, often requiring a bit more physical exertion, a different kind of quiet discipline. Picture a summer afternoon, the air thick with the scent of freshly cut grass, a child, perhaps a boy of 12 or 13, steadily pushing a heavy reel lawnmower across a verdant lawn. These weren't the lightweight, engine-powered machines of today, these were substantial pieces of equipment, often requiring genuine effort and a steady pace to achieve an even cut. The repetitive motion, the whir of the blades, the earthy smell that permeated the air, all spoke of a task that demanded focus and perseverance. This contribution to the neatness and upkeep of the family property was more than just physical labor, it was a concrete lesson in responsibility for shared spaces, a tangible demonstration of pride in one's home. It taught patience, physical endurance, and the satisfaction of seeing a sprawling, unkempt lawn transform into a neat, manicured expanse, a visible testament to one's efforts. The lines of freshly mown grass, sharp and distinct, were a quiet badge of accomplishment. But the spectrum of chores stretched far beyond washing dishes and mowing lawns, enveloping almost every aspect of daily living. Consider the simple act of making one's own bed each morning. This wasn't always a task that needed explicit instruction every day, it became a quiet, automatic gesture, an initiation into self-care and orderliness. Smooth sheets, plumped pillows, a neatly aligned blanket, these small details contributed to a personal sense of tidiness and respect for one's own space, a foundational step in managing one's environment. And then there were the more communal duties that bound the family together. Gathering eggs from a small backyard coop, if the family was fortunate enough to have one, was a delicate task, requiring a gentle touch and a careful stride. Feeding the family pet, whether a loyal dog or a watchful cat, instilled a sense of empathy and consistent care. Shoveling snow from the driveway after a winter storm, an often frosty and back-breaking endeavor, taught resilience and proactive problem-solving. Carrying groceries home from the local store, often in heavy paper bags that threatened to tear, built strength and a quiet understanding of the family's provisions. Sweeping the porch, dusting the furniture, helping to fold laundry, each task, no matter how seemingly mundane, held a quiet significance. These responsibilities were not imposed lightly or arbitrarily. They were, in many ways, the unwritten curriculum of household management, lessons gently imparted and absorbed through consistent practice. They instilled within children a profound and lasting work ethic, a quiet understanding that effort yields results, that consistency brings completion. It wasn't about being good or bad, it was simply about doing what needed to be done, about contributing one's fair share to the collective well-being of the family unit. This systematic engagement with household tasks fostered a deep, quiet sense of contribution, a feeling of being an integral part of something larger than oneself. Children understood, often implicitly, that their efforts were valuable, that their actions directly impacted the comfort and efficiency of their home. This feeling of being truly useful, of making a tangible difference, was a powerful motivator, quietly shaping their developing sense of self-worth and capability. The rhythm of these chores, the steady cadence of daily and weekly tasks, also taught a particular kind of time management, an early understanding of prioritization and planning. A child might learn to finish their homework before tackling their chores, or to complete a task before going out to play with friends. This quiet negotiation of time, this subtle balancing act, laid an early foundation for future organizational skills, for understanding the delicate interplay between work and leisure, responsibility and enjoyment. And in this shared undertaking, there was also an unspoken camaraderie, a quiet bonding that occurred. Siblings might grumble together over a particularly arduous task, but in that shared experience, a quiet understanding and connection often formed. Parents, too, often worked alongside their children, demonstrating the tasks, gently guiding their efforts, turning the chore into a shared activity rather than a solitary imposition. These moments, often filled with quiet instruction or shared silence, subtly reinforced family bonds and mutual respect. So, as we gently reflect on these contributions, we glimpse a childhood where the boundaries between play and purposeful work were often beautifully blurred, where the dignity of labor was taught not through lectures, but through doing, through the quiet, consistent act of being a contributing member of the family. It was a time when the roots of responsibility were deeply planted in the fertile soil of home life, nurtured by the simple expectation of doing one's part, fostering a quiet confidence and a lasting appreciation for the value of effort. Tonight, we drift back to a simpler time, a quieter time, where the hum of everyday life was perhaps a little softer, a little slower. As you settle into your most comfortable place, perhaps dimming the lights just so, allowing the gentle hush of the evening to embrace you, we will embark on a journey through the childhoods of the 1940s and 50s. We will explore the textures of their days, the gentle rhythms of their play, and the small, significant delights that colored their nascent years. If, at the end of our tranquil ramble, you find yourself feeling a little more rested, a little more serene, consider offering a quiet like or subscribing, should the mood ever strike you to join us again for another gentle exploration. And so, our meandering journey brings us to another cherished cornerstone of childhood, a place often imbued with the sweetest memories and the promise of small, affordable delights. Beyond the familiar stoops and the sun-dappled parks, beyond the clatter of bicycle wheels on the pavement, lay the local candy store, a truly magical destination for the children of the 1940s and 50s. This was not a sprawling supermarket aisle, nor a brightly lit chain store, but often a humble, perhaps even slightly dusty, emporium, tucked away on a neighborhood street, emanating an almost irresistible sugary perfume that beckoned young hearts from blocks away. The air inside these small establishments was a unique symphony of scents, a rich blend of vanilla, peppermint, artificial cherry, and chocolate, occasionally mingled with the subtle, appealing scent of old wood and the crisp, clean paper bags that held so many treasures. Sunlight, if it managed to find its way through the front window, would often illuminate dust motes dancing in the air, adding an almost ethereal glow to the rows and rows of sweet temptations. Glass display cases, sometimes finger-smudged from countless eager inspections, showcased an astonishing array of candies, each one a potential object of desire, each one within the grasp of a few carefully saved pennies. For a child in those decades, the penny candy store represented a world of pure, unadulterated choice, a place where a nickel or even a single penny held surprising power. Imagine holding that shiny copper coin, its cool weight a symbol of imminent joy, and then facing the delightful agony of selection. Would it be the sticky, chewy caramel, perhaps a Mary Jane or a Charleston Chew, promising a long-lasting sweetness? Or would it be the instant gratification of a handful of tiny, colorful buttons of pure sugar, meticulously arranged on a strip of paper, to be peeled off one by one? Perhaps a vibrant lollipop, its swirling colors promising a kaleidoscope of flavor, or the subtle tartness of a lemon drop, slowly dissolving on the tongue. The choices seemed limitless: licorice whips, both black and red, their distinctive anise flavor a acquired taste for some, a beloved indulgence for others. There were wax lips and wax bottles filled with sweet, colored syrup, offering not just a treat but a playful prop. Gumballs in every imaginable hue, often dispensed from a clunky machine, promising not just a sugary chew but perhaps even a thin, flat comic or a tiny plastic toy tucked within. Chocolate drops, foil-wrapped kisses, jelly beans in every fruit flavor, candy bracelets with edible jewels that could be worn and then slowly savored, each item offered its own particular charm and its own unique experience. Beyond the confectionery, many of these small stores also stocked a modest selection of small toys, further enhancing their allure. These were not elaborate, battery-operated marvels, but simple delights: a colorful bouncy ball that could fit in a pocket, a deck of miniature playing cards, a tiny tin soldier, a plastic ring with a sparkling faux gem, or a simple whirligig. For a very small sum, a child could leave not only with a sweet treat but also with a new, simple plaything to spark their imagination for the afternoon. The transaction itself was a ritual, a silent dance between the child and the often kindly proprietor, who understood the profound importance of these small purchases. The quiet counting of coins, the careful deliberation, the final, triumphant pointing to the chosen delicacies. The gentle rustle as the selected candies were scooped into a small, usually brown paper bag, the distinct crinkle of the paper signaling the culmination of a delightful quest. The feeling of that small bag, cool and slightly crinkly, held securely in a young hand, as one stepped back out into the bright afternoon sunlight, was a feeling of profound satisfaction. More than just a place to buy sweets, the penny candy store often served as a significant hub of childhood social activity. It was a natural meeting point, a place where friends might rendezvous after school, compare their allowances, and collectively decide how to best spend their precious coins. Discussions about the merits of a root beer barrel versus a peppermint stick would unfold, strategies for penny stretching would be debated, and the latest neighborhood news might be quietly exchanged amidst the sweet aromas. Children would gather, sometimes pressing their noses against the glass, their breath clouding the view for a moment as they contemplated the treasures within. They would share their finds, sometimes even trading a gummy bear for a chocolate button, fostering a sense of camaraderie and shared delight. The candy store was a place of small triumphs, of simple pleasures, and of burgeoning independence, where children could exercise a measure of control over their desires, making their own choices, and experiencing the satisfying reward of their efforts. It was a place where small amounts of money could translate into genuine joy, where imagination could be sparked not by digital screens but by the tactile presence of a sugar cube train or a bag of candy buttons. The penny candy store, in its unassuming way, offered a tangible connection to the material world of childhood desires, shaping memories that would linger long after the last sweet morsel had been savored. Its quiet presence, its distinct scents, and its promise of affordable wonder made it an indelible landmark in the landscape of childhood during the 1940s and 50s. Tonight, we drift back to a simpler time, a quieter era, to explore the rhythms of daily life for children growing up in the 1940s and 50s. As you settle into your most comfortable spot, perhaps dimming the lights, we will gently unfold the tapestry of their world. If, by the end of our journey, you find a sense of peace, we invite you to softly consider liking this video or subscribing, allowing us to continue crafting these tranquil narratives for you. We now turn our thoughts to the heart of the home, to those moments when the day's scattered energies coalesced around the warmth of the dinner table. Family meals were indeed a profound cornerstone of daily life, extending beyond mere nourishment to become rich opportunities for conversation, for connection, and for the weaving of shared experiences that anchored each family member. This was not simply a transaction of hunger appeased, it was a deeply social ritual, a daily affirmation of belonging. The kitchen, or perhaps the dining room, would become a central stage at least once, often twice, each day. The aroma of supper simmering on the stove would begin to beckon children indoors as twilight deepened, carrying with it the promise of savory goodness. These meals were typically prepared from scratch, often utilizing ingredients grown in a family garden or sourced from local markets, lending a freshness and a wholesome simplicity to every dish. Gravy, often made from the pan drippings of a roasted chicken or a pot roast, would be carefully prepared, its rich scent filling the air. Vegetables, perhaps green beans from the garden, boiled and seasoned with a little bacon fat, or mashed potatoes, fluffy and creamy, would accompany the main course. These were practical, hearty meals, designed to sustain busy bodies and growing minds. At the table, there was an unspoken, yet firmly understood, order. Children were generally expected to be present, to be polite, and to participate, albeit sometimes quietly, in the family's exchange. It was a time for parents to inquire about the day's triumphs and small tribulations, for siblings to recount their adventures, sometimes with playful embellishment. The father, often having returned from a long day at work, would sometimes sit at the head of the table, presiding over the meal, carving the meat if it was a roast, or perhaps offering a blessing before they began to eat. The conversation might drift from school news to neighborhood happenings, from upcoming church events to the weather, or even to reflections on current events gleaned from the evening radio broadcast. It was a gentle flow of information and shared thought, a daily download of the family's collective existence. Beyond the everyday gathering, the cadence of the week often culminated in the truly special occasion of Sunday dinner. These were often more elaborate affairs, frequently larger gatherings, sometimes extending an invitation to grandparents, aunts, uncles, or close family friends. The preparation for Sunday dinner would often begin early in the morning, a concerted effort, perhaps the mother baking a substantial roast chicken or a beef roast, filling the house with an irresistible warmth and richness. The dining table would be meticulously set, perhaps with a tablecloth reserved for such occasions, and the best china might even make an appearance, its delicate patterns adding a touch of elegance. The menu for Sunday dinner was typically more expansive, a feast for the senses. Beyond the main roast, there would be an array of side dishes, perhaps glazed carrots, corn on the cob in season, a green salad with homemade dressing, and, of course, homemade bread, still warm from the oven, with plenty of butter. Dessert was almost a given, often a pie, perhaps apple or cherry, or a rich chocolate cake, something that required time and love to create. These desserts were not everyday indulgences, they were carefully planned climaxes to a week's gentle pacing. The sounds of Sunday dinner were distinct. There was the clinking of cutlery, the soft murmur of several conversations weaving and intertwining, punctuated by occasional laughter. Children, often dressed in their Sunday best, would be encouraged to speak clearly, to use their manners, to offer assistance in clearing the table, or perhaps even in washing dishes afterwards. These meals could last for a considerable time, stretching through the afternoon, allowing for extended conversations, storytelling, and the reinforcement of familial bonds. It was a time to slow down, to truly savor the company of loved ones, to feel deeply embedded within the larger family structure. These dinners were not merely about the food, though that was certainly appreciated. They were about the shared presence, the unspoken understanding, the comfort of routine, and the comforting predictability of gathering together. They instilled in children a sense of belonging, a fundamental understanding of their place within the family unit, and a gentle rhythm to their weeks. The traditions surrounding these meals, whether it was a particular prayer before eating, a specific seating arrangement, or a customary dessert, became part of the family's unique lore, passed down through generations, creating a comforting narrative of home and hearth. These shared moments around the table were indeed the quiet anchors of childhood in those unhurried decades. Tonight, as twilight gently descends and wraps the world in its soft embrace, we drift back to a time when youthful eyes, full of wonder, gazed at a future shimmering with possibility. Perhaps you might find a comfortable spot now, dimming the lights, allowing a gentle hush to settle around you, as we explore the quiet dreams and burgeoning hopes that stirred in the hearts of children in the 1950s. If you find our journey together tonight calming, and should you enjoy this peaceful shared moment, a gentle tap on that like button and subscribing for more tranquil stories would certainly be appreciated, but for now, simply relax. The world they inhabited was one emerging from the long shadows of war, blooming with an earnest, almost palpable optimism, a sense that progress was not just possible, but inevitable, a constant, comforting hum beneath the surface of daily life. For these children, growing up amidst the burgeoning prosperity of the post-war era, the future was not a distant, abstract concept, but a vibrant tapestry woven with the threads of technological marvels and thrilling discoveries, forever stretching out towards the horizon. Their imaginations were vivid, nurtured by the burgeoning mediums of television and cinema, by the glossy pages of magazines, and the captivating panels of comic books, each offering tantalizing glimpses of what tomorrow might hold. These stories were not just entertainment, they were portals to a world yet to be, shaping the very fabric of their dreams. They saw streamlined automobiles that promised effortless journeys, homes equipped with ingenious gadgets that would simplify every chore, and cities that gleamed with chrome and glass, reaching ever higher into the cerulean sky. It was a vision of life made easier, more comfortable, and infinitely more exciting. Perhaps one of the most enthralling visions, one that truly captured the collective imagination, was that of space exploration. The cosmos, once the exclusive domain of scientists and philosophers, began to feel within reach, a grand, new frontier beckoning with silent, starry promises. The idea of venturing beyond Earth, of soaring amongst the planets, moving effortlessly through the vast, inky blackness, was no longer confined to the realms of fantastical literature. It was slowly, steadily, becoming a tangible aspiration. They watched with wide, enthralled eyes as the first tentative steps towards this monumental goal were reported, breathlessly, across the nation. The concept of rockets, powerful machines capable of escaping Earth's gravitational pull, was slowly entering public consciousness, transforming from a weapon of war into a vessel of discovery. They imagined themselves as intrepid astronauts, clad in cumbersome yet heroic spacesuits, peering out from small portholes at a swirling, blue and white marble, their home, shrinking ever smaller behind them. The space race, though its formal moniker would come a little later, was already beginning its quiet, almost imperceptible inception during these years, a subtle undercurrent of ambition and competition stirring beneath the seemingly calm surface of international relations. Nations were quietly, diligently, investing in the nascent field of rocketry, assembling the brightest minds, challenging the boundaries of engineering and physics. While much of this activity was cloaked in governmental secrecy, the general sentiment of striving towards the stars, of reaching for the heavens, permeated society, coloring the aspirations of a generation. Children would spend hours poring over illustrations of rockets with sleek, aerodynamic designs, imagining the thunderous roar of their engines as they lifted off, leaving plumes of smoke behind them. They collected models, carefully assembling each piece, their small hands bringing miniature intergalactic vessels to life on their bedroom floors. They discussed with earnest seriousness the possibility of life on other planets, the existence of strange, alien landscapes, and the profound implications of encountering extraterrestrial beings, their young minds grappling with concepts that would challenge scientists for decades to come. This period was characterized by a profound sense of forward momentum, a belief in human ingenuity and its ability to overcome any obstacle. The advancements in science and technology were not just abstract concepts, they were transforming daily life, bringing forth new conveniences and possibilities. From the widespread adoption of television sets to the continued development of domestic appliances, the children of the 1950s were accustomed to a world that was constantly evolving, a world where yesterday's marvel was today's commonplace, and tomorrow promised even greater wonders. Their sense of optimism was also deeply rooted in the economic prosperity that many families were beginning to experience. The war-torn economies were rebuilding, and a newfound sense of security and stability allowed for a more expansive view of the future. Parents, having endured the hardships of the Great Depression and a global conflict, were eager to provide their children with a life free from such burdens, a life filled with opportunity and promise. This parental aspiration for a better tomorrow naturally infused the children with a similar, perhaps even more potent, belief in a bright, unfolding future. School curricula, too, often reflected this emphasis on progress and discovery. Science fairs became vibrant showcases of youthful curiosity, with homemade rockets, intricate electrical circuits, and ambitious chemistry experiments filling gymnasium halls. Teachers encouraged an inquisitive spirit, urging students to explore, to question, to dream of contributing to the scientific and technological advancements that were reshaping their world. The very atmosphere of learning was imbued with the excitement of impending breakthroughs and grand explorations. Even their play reflected these aspirations. Many a backyard became a launch pad, many a treehouse transformed into a spaceship command center, many a cardboard box ingeniously repurposed into a lunar module. Their games were enactments of their future dreams, a playful rehearsal for the realities they believed awaited them. They were not just playing, they were rehearsing for a future they genuinely believed was theirs to build, theirs to explore, theirs to conquer. This quiet, unwavering belief in a technologically advanced and prosperous future, fueled by media and a societal optimism that felt both earnest and boundless, was a defining characteristic of childhood in the 1950s. It was a time when the world was expanding, not just geographically, but conceptually, reaching for the stars, and inviting its youngest inhabitants to dream along with it, their innocent hopes and burgeoning imaginations forming the very bedrock of the future that would soon unfold. They were the children of tomorrow, quietly, dreamily, preparing for its arrival. Tonight, as we gently approach the quiet conclusion of our journey through the childhoods of the 1940s and 50s, perhaps you might allow your own thoughts to drift, to settle comfortably, as you prepare to embrace peaceful rest. Let the soft glow of your surroundings, or the gentle darkness, invite a sense of calm. If you find gentle solace in these quiet narratives, a soft whisper of a like or a quiet subscription would be a lovely gesture, allowing others to discover these moments of calm history as well. As the long days, so often filled with sun-drenched explorations and the joyful clamor of children at play, gradually surrendered to the lengthening shadows of twilight, a different rhythm began to assert itself within the homes of the 1940s and 50s. The boisterous energy of afternoon adventures would slowly ebb, replaced by a growing quietude, a subtle descent into a realm of routine and comforting predictability that signaled the approach of bedtime. For many children, this transition began with the simple, yet profound, act of tidying up. Toys, perhaps scattered across the floor in the heat of an imaginary battle or a tea party with beloved dolls, would be gathered and returned to their designated places. Puzzles, half finished on the kitchen table, might be set aside for another day, their pieces carefully collected. This small ritual of order, this gentle restoration of peace to the home, often served as a symbolic winding down, preparing both the child and the household for the slower pace of the evening. Then, there was the evening bath, a simple yet often cherished part of the daily structure. The warmth of the water, perhaps scented with a mild soap, offered a moment of cleansing and relaxation. For younger children, it might have been a playful splash and giggle, a final burst of jovial energy before the true calm descended. For older children, it was a quiet, contemplative time, a space to reflect on the day's events, to shed the dust and worries of their youthful world before slipping into clean, soft pajamas. The very act of changing into nightclothes, often made of flannel or cotton, added another layer of physical comfort, an invitation to quiet repose. The heart of the evening rituals, however, often revolved around the soothing presence of a parent or an older sibling, a time for stories and gentle conversation. These were not always elaborate affairs, but rather moments of intimate connection, a chance for the child to feel truly seen and heard at the close of their day. For countless children, the sound of a parent's voice, soft and reassuring, was the most potent lullaby. Bedtime stories were a cherished tradition, a journey into realms of imagination before the journey into sleep. Perhaps it was a well-worn fairy tale, its characters and plot deeply familiar, offering the comfort of repeated narrative. Or it could have been an adventure from a favorite children's book, the pages turning slowly as the story unfolded, each word carrying the child further away from the day-to-day and closer to the threshold of dreams. The gentle cadence of the storyteller's voice, the steady rhythm of the words, created a profound sense of security, building a warm cocoon around the child. These stories ranged widely, from mischievous animals to brave knights, from curious children navigating their own small worlds to fantastical landscapes populated by talking trees and helpful sprites. What they all shared was the power to transport, to engage the young mind in a calm and imaginative way, preparing it for the restful quiet that would follow. The act of listening, of picturing the events and characters described, fostered a quiet sense of wonder, allowing the day's concerns to recede softly into the background. Beyond stories, many homes in the 1940s and 50s incorporated prayers into their bedtime routine. These were often simple, heartfelt words, taught from a young age, expressing gratitude and seeking blessings for the night. The act of kneeling beside the bed, or sitting quietly with clasped hands, provided a moment of spiritual connection, a sense of belonging to something larger and more enduring than oneself. This ritual of prayer, regardless of specific religious affiliation, instilled a profound sense of peace and protection, assuring the child that they were watched over and cared for. It offered a quiet reflection, a space for personal thoughts and whispered hopes before the silence of sleep descended. For some children, especially as they grew a little older, bedtime involved a period of quiet contemplation. Lying in bed, perhaps with the moon casting soft shadows through the window or the distant sound of crickets filling the air, they would reflect on their day. These were moments of internal processing, of revisiting successes and challenges, of planning for tomorrow's adventures. This quiet introspection, unburdened by external demands, was a preparation not just for sleep, but for the continued development of their inner world, fostering a sense of self-awareness and thoughtful reflection. The simple act of being tucked in, a light blanket drawn up to the chin, a gentle kiss on the forehead, or a quiet hug, cemented this feeling of security. These small, tactile gestures of affection communicated far more than words ever could, assuring the child of their loved one's presence and care, even as they entered the solitude of sleep. It was a final, tender affirmation of love, a comforting embrace that carried them into the night. The presence of a nightlight, a small glow in the corner of a room, might have offered soft reassurance against the deeper shadows. Or perhaps a favored toy, clutched close, provided a tangible piece of comfort, a silent companion through the night hours. These seemingly small details contributed significantly to the children's sense of safety and belonging. These bedtime rituals, repeated with gentle consistency night after night, imbued the close of each day with a profound sense of security and structure. They provided a predictable framework, a comforting rhythm in a world that, particularly in the 1940s, often felt uncertain and in flux. The routine itself became a source of solace, a reliable anchor that children could depend on. It taught them the comforting cycle of the day, the understanding that after activity would come rest, and after rest, a new day of possibilities. The noisy, joyful, and sometimes challenging adventures of the day, the scraped knees and triumphant leaps, the whispered secrets and boisterous games, gradually gave way to a tranquil calm. The world outside the bedroom door quieted, its demands receding as the household settled into its evening slumber. And so, with a final story whispered, a quiet prayer offered, or a moment of gentle contemplation, the children of the 1940s and 50s would drift into peaceful rest. Their minds, filled with the echoes of stories and the warmth of parental love, would embark on their own quiet journeys in dreams, safe in the knowledge that a new day, with its own fresh possibilities and familiar routines, would greet them with the morning light. Their childhoods, rich in simple joys and deeply rooted security, concluded each day in this gentle, reassuring embrace of home and hearth. As our own journey now draws to a close, May your evening be filled with a similar sense of calm and quiet repose. May the memories we have gently explored ease your mind, allowing you to drift peacefully into a deeply restful slumber. Good night.